All right, good afternoon. I will be joined shortly by Jane Connors, the UN's first ever UN's victim rights advocate. The Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed, just arrived in Haiti for a visit to the country, and she's joined by the Special Envoy, Joseph Sheeran, as well as the new Special Representative for MINORITIES, Susan Page. As I mentioned yesterday, they'll be meeting high-level government officials and key stakeholders and visit communities that have been hardest hit by the cholera epidemic and visit government flagship development initiatives. Our humanitarian colleagues report that from Syria that they are deeply concerned about the impact on civilians of ongoing fighting across the governorate of DEIR-EZ-ZOR. Yesterday, airstrikes on El Mayadeen city and its surroundings reportedly killed more than 25 people and injured many others, most of them women and children. Since August of this year, fighting has reportedly driven more. Even your laugh makes it out, Edie. Even your laugh makes it out, Edie. All right. Even your laugh makes it out, Edie. All right. Has reportedly driven out more than 350,000 people out of their homes in DEIR-EZ-ZOR. The city was last reached with humanitarian convoy earlier this week on October 30th. Since the opening of a key road, the UN has been able to regularly send aid to the area. The UN calls on all parties to take all measures to protect civilians and to facilitate safe and unimpeded and sustained access to all people in need across the country. And from Bangladesh, we're told that some 4,000 Rohingya refugees have fled Myanmar, have crossed the border into Bangladesh in the last 48 hours. The newly arrived refugees say that thousands more people are waiting for on the coast of Myanmar to make the crossing. UN agencies and their partners are providing food and other supplies as well as transportation to transit centers to these refugees. For its part, UNICEF is concerned that 7.5% of children at the largest refugee camp in Bangladesh are suffering from severe acute malnutrition, double the rate seen among Rohingya child refugees earlier this year. And as part of the Secretary General's initiative on increasing transparency in regards to allegations of sexual exploitation and abuse, wanted to give you an update on cases of sexual exploitation and abuse, which we'll try now to do on a quarterly basis. For the period of July 1st to the 30th of September, we have received 31 allegations. Not all of them have been verified, and some are in preliminary assessment phase. Out of the 31 allegations, 12 are from peacekeeping operations, 19 from agencies, funds, and programs. 10 are categorized as sexual abuse, 19 as sexual exploitation, and 2 are of an unknown nature. 12 of these allegations occurred in 2017, 2 in 2016, 6 in 2015 or prior, and the date are unknown for 11 of them. 38 male alleged perpetrators have been associated with these incidents. Of the 36 victims, 72% are women, 19% are girls. The others are 19% are girls. 14 investigations have been launched during this time frame. Meanwhile, we've continued our support to implement the Secretary General's strategy to combat sexual exploitation and abuse. Victim rights advocates have been appointed at headquarters and in 4 field missions. And as I mentioned, we will have Jane Connors with us shortly. She's just returned from the Central African Republic, where she traveled with the Secretary General. We're also piloting a victim assistance protocol, which sets the roles and responsibility of those on the ground to ensure coordination and to provide victims with immediate assistance. And with the most recent voluntary contributions from member states, the trust fund in support of victims of sexual exploitation and abuse will rise to $1.5 million. The Secretary General has also instructed the heads of all entities system-wide to provide an action plan and risk analyses to commit the leadership to the fight against sexual exploitation and abuse, and almost all have been received. With regards to our efforts to end impunity, we're developing an electronic tool for screening UN staff dismissed as a result of substantiated allegations of sexual exploitation and abuse, or who resigned or who were dismissed during an investigation. We've also launched mandatory training for all UN personnel prior to deployment. This month, we're piloting in the Democratic Republic of the Congo a single and uniform incident report form to ensure assistance is provided immediately and appropriate investigative action is undertaken to improve data collection. We're also continuing our efforts to engage with member states. So far, 58 heads of states or government have joined the Secretary-General Circle of Leadership. 74 member states have signed on to the voluntary compact. 18 have formally indicated their intention to sign it. I will share with you what I've just read out if you need it, and the information that I've shared with you should now be up on a new UN website focusing on this issue. Meanwhile, I wanted to flag that UNHCR today released a report that warns that discrimination, exclusion, and persecution are stark realities for many of the world's stateless minorities, and calls for immediate action to secure equal nationality rights for all. The report shows that more than 75% of the world's known stateless population belong to minorities, and that if left unaddressed, their protracted marginalization can build resentment, increase fear, and in most extreme cases, lead to instability, insecurity, and displacement. More on UNHCR's website. And the UN Human Rights Office said today it is concerned by what it calls an unfolding humanitarian emergency at Australia's offshore processing center in Manus Island in Papua New Guinea. Refugees and asylum seekers there are holding off after Australia's decision to close the facility and pull support staff. More information online. And our colleagues at the UN Office for Drugs and Crime tell us that they've signed an agreement with Colombia to tackle the country's cocoa cultivation and help farmers embrace alternative development. Under the agreement, the UNODC and Colombia will start a $315 million project to monitor the country's policy to reduce illicit crops and to strengthen rural development as part of the country's ongoing peace-building efforts. I also want to flag that Director General of UNESCO, Irena Bokova, today called for an investigation into the killing of television cameraman Arkan Sharifi in the Iraqi city of Dakuk in Kirkuk Governorate on October 30th. She also deplored the killing of another television journalist, Qais al-Qadi, in eastern Ghouta in Syria on October 29th. Ms. Bokova reminds all the parties of their obligations to ensure the safety of journalists in conflict situation in keeping with the Geneva Conventions. And our colleagues at the UN Environmental Program tell us that several insurance regulators from around the world have committed to develop best practices to ensure that insurers consider climate-related risks in their underwriting and reserving. The commitments were made at UNEP's convened Sustainable Insurance Forum in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. And today is, besides Friday, World Tsunami Awareness Day. For the second year in a row, this day will align with the theme of the International Day for Disaster Reduction and will focus on a Target B of the Sendai framework, which aims at reducing the number of affected people globally by disasters. More information online. And I wanted to say that I stand corrected on the status of Ms. Rosalind Akombe within the United Nations. Ms. Akombe returned to the UN earlier this week. She had been on special leave without pay after being nominated by the Kenyan government to serve on the country's electoral commission. Following the end of that assignment late last month, Ms. Akombe requested to curtail the period of her special leave and resume her work for the organization. Regarding her supposed stipulation of her contract prohibiting her from speaking to the media, there is of course no such contract or no such stipulation in any UN contract. According to long-standing UN media guidelines, UN personnel staff may speak to the media in their area of expertise and to provide factual information. And I was just not informed of that development. And today we say thank you to our friends in Mauritania for having paid their budget dues in full for 2017, bringing us up to, I even forgot, 138. Mr. Lee, and then Carol.
Of other stuff, but I just, on this Rosalind Akambe thing, I guess I'd wanted, since I'd asked yesterday, and so apparently they did, it seems like the nation did speak to her, because that's how it became public, and they did directly quote her as saying that she signed a new contract and that she's not allowed to speak to the press about the Kenyan election. So I wanted to know, did she in fact sign a new contract? Will you confirm, given the fact that it appears clear that the Kenyan ambassador démarched and said that there was something wrong with the special leave without pay that was granted to go and work on an election and then call for the boycott of the election. What has the Secretary General learned from this? Does he have any response to what the Kenyan ambassador has raised? Look, why would she say she has it's in the contract if it's not?
Look, I don't know. I wasn't present when she gave the interview. What I can tell you is the fact that there is no UN contracts do not have gag rules, or staff contracts do not have gag rules that prevent people from speaking to the press. There are media rules in place. People are encouraged to speak to the press in their areas of responsibility. That is a fact, and that stands. Her special leave without pay was granted through the usual channels, and each case is examined on its merits.
Given that during the special leave without pay, she said boycott the elections, is there? I guess that's why I'm asking you, is because it seems like it's unclear to others what they can do, either whether on leave or not. Like, is there an inquiry into that? Is that a closed matter? Is that something that's
I'm not aware of any inquiry. Ms. Landry.
Stefan, on the SEA, what you just read, the 12 allegations for peacekeeping missions, can you tell us which missions?
No, there are 12 allegations that were received from across the system. So, in fact, some of them come from agencies and programs, and some of them come from peacekeeping missions.
Oh, you said 12 for peacekeeping, 19.
Or 19. I'm sorry. I do apologize. You're right.
You said 31 in all.
Yes. From the peacekeeping missions, there are MINUSCA, MINUSMA, MINUSTA, MONUSCO, and from the agencies, it's the IOM, UNHCR, UNICEF, and UNICEF.
Okay,
I'll give you all the
yes,
breakdown
thank you.
numbers.
The breakdown will be, and also, what is an electronic tool to screen UN staff?
It's basically a way for us to have a better idea across the UN system that if someone was dismissed during an investigation on an SEA, or was found to have been engaged in these matters, their name is flagged, and that person is now rehired by one part of the system after having been let go from another part of the system.
Which is a list.
It's not just it's an important monitoring tool. I mean, it's obviously we live in an electronic age. It's not going to be in a paper format that's going to go away. So it's going to be
I thought it was something more sophisticated than that. You basically keeping the name.
We're flagging names in a way that I don't think across the UN system we had not been flagging in a way we should have been. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Stefan. Has there been any progress in UN efforts to persuade Myanmar government to take back all these refugees in Bangladesh? Because so much has happened, Security Council meetings, missions. What has been the outcome?
Well, I think the situation on the ground speaks for itself. We have not had the access, humanitarian access we need and we want to northern Rakhine State. And people cannot be forced to go home. If people go home, they need to go home with their rights guaranteed. They need to go home freely, and they need to go home to the homes that they had and not be placed in any other places. So the short answer is no, there's not been any progress. Yeah.
Yesterday, Filippo Grandi mentioned that the WFP was talking to Myanmar about humanitarian access. So, based on what you've read, can we assume that?
I have not been given any updates that we've been successful in humanitarian access. Yeah, Mr. Lee, and then.
Sure. I wanted to ask you about first. It's reported that Mohammed Ibn Chambas went to Nigeria, and there's a quote I wanted to ask you about, in which he is reported to have said that that Mr. Guterres, hang on a second, You just sorry, thought I got distracted by Ms. Okambe. If you want to call somebody else too, because I want to ask you the rest of the quote. Please do.
Yes, on Monday, the COP23 in Bonn will officially start, and we know the Secretary General will be there on the 15th, I believe. So, what's the UN's expectation in general from this important conference, and what's the message of the Secretary General to this conference would be?
I think the message of the Secretary General is that we need to do more, that the commitments made in Paris are not enough, that we need to see reinvigorated commitments from governments. We need the full throttle support and participation of the private sector, of civil society. I mean, I think the reports that have been issued in the last week, whether it's the UNEP report or the WMO report, shows that we need to do more if we are going to stem the continuing warming temperatures. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Stefan. Any decision about UN attending Sochi or Mr. de Mistura?
I will tell as soon as someone tells me. I will tell you.
Why is this hesitant by the UN to support this process or to attend?
We're a careful lot. It's not. I'm not just focusing on Sochi. Obviously, we have to see what the situation is, and then we'll make our decision. Yes, Edie.
Steph, on the 31 allegations between July 1st and September 30th, is this an increase or a decrease from the same period in 2016?
Well, the comparable, I don't have those comparable figures because we're really, it's something we've started, I think, as of January 1st, this kind of monitoring. We can see what figures we had, but this is part of our ongoing efforts of improving our monitoring and reporting. Obviously, we're seeing allegations that date back a few years because I think there's probably a sense that people feel freer to come forward and safer to come forward with allegations.
Well,
yeah,
as a follow-up, considering that a significant number of these allegations are from this year, what is the Secretary General's response to particularly these latest allegations?
I think the Secretary General is obviously disappointed and saddened that these actions continue. To get to the in order to stem these things, it's about better training, it's about better awareness, and it's about better partnerships with the troop contributors, and that's something that he's been very much focusing on, and I'm sure Jane can talk to you more about that as well. Yes, Matthew.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot. I wanted to ask, it was said that Mr. Mohammed Ibn Chambas was in Nigeria, and he's quoted as saying that the Secretary General is gratified by the quelling of recent agitations by some secessionist groups. This is a quote in the Nigerian press. So what I wanted to know is, I'd asked you before, in Togo, there was some dispute about whether he'd said that the president can continue, or that the UN thinks that's okay to continue to 2030. But I guess what I'm wondering is, since this statement seems to be similar to what Francois Fall, and I've asked you actually in writing to explain his quote to UN Radio, that secessionists are extremists. Is this somehow a Guterres doctrine? Is there a consistency in the approach of these two envoys?
I can't speak to the veracity of the quote, but I would not label this a Guterres doctrine.
But but then I guess what I'm wondering is that the Francois Fall one, I'm vouching, telling you, he said it to UN Radio. He said that those advocating secession are extremists.
Listen, I think, and I answered that. I answered that.
I thought you said you hadn't heard.
No, I think I answered that yesterday. All right, I'm going to go get our guest.